All right, so today we're going to be diving into all things Devon, and he's a fascinating character, right? Like, if you think about strategy, he's practically playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers.
He really is. And, he gives off this total lone wolf vibe. But when you actually get deeper into his journals and conversations, there's this whole other layer there, like some seriously deep thinking going on beneath the surface.
Yeah, and those journals are like peeking right into his playbook, especially when it comes to how he approaches self-improvement. It's almost like he's trying to, like, optimize the human experience or something.
Oh, absolutely. You see that really clearly in how he breaks down happiness. I mean, he's got these meticulous notes about it, even talking about dopamine and serotonin like it's a chemistry equation.
Right. It's less about, follow your heart and way more like hack your happiness, which honestly had me thinking, wait, could this actually work? What do you make of that whole approach, trying to dissect happiness like that?
It's fascinating, isn't it? On the one hand, it speaks to this drive for self-mastery. Like, if he can crack the code of happiness, he can engineer a better life. But then you got to wonder, can you really hack it? Or do you end up missing out on what makes emotions, well, feel real?
It's a good point. Like, are you really experiencing happiness if you're too busy trying to control it? Makes you wonder what experiences led him to think this way?
Exactly. It's like he's searching for a formula for something as complex as human emotion. And it's not just happiness, this control thing. It pops up everywhere, especially in how he handles relationships.
And yeah, let's talk about those relationships because that's where things get really interesting, right? He's got these walls up, avoids vulnerability like it's the plague. It's like he's terrified of letting anyone in.
And yet he still forms these really complex bonds. It's like he's drawn to connection, even though he's scared of it. And it's through those relationships, messy as they are, that we start to see the cracks in his armor.
Okay, so where do we even begin with unpacking all of that? We've got Kelly, Kenny, Liz. Each one seems to bring out something different in him.
Let's start with Kelly.
Hmm.
She really pushes back against this whole emotional detachment thing. Remember that conversation they have about fear?
Oh, yeah, where she's feeling lost, and he actually drops his guard for a second and admits to being afraid himself. Even talks about using stoicism to deal with it.
It's huge because it reveals this contradiction in him. He's all about logic and control, yet here he is, acknowledging fear, the very emotion he tries so hard to suppress.
And don't forget when he puts his arm around her. Such a small gesture. But for Devon, it speaks volumes. Maybe he's not as immune to vulnerability as he pretends to be.
Exactly. It's like this little flicker of honesty that throws off his whole game. Makes you wonder if it could be a turning point for him.
It's definitely possible, but then you have his dynamic with Kenny, which is totally different. It's like this constant battle of wits, always challenging each other's worldviews.
Yeah. And that trolley problem they discuss. Perfect example. Kenny's all about the morality of it, agonizing over the choices, while Devon's focused on logic and consequences, even if it means making the tough call.
It's like he's calculated the greatest good, consequences be damned, which is classic utilitarianism versus Kenny's more deontological approach. Any philosophy fans listening are probably geeking out right now.
And the thing is, there's no easy answer to that trolley problem, right? Like, neither approach is perfect, which just shows how tricky those ethical dilemmas can be.
Yeah, it's like head versus heart and Devon's team head all the way. But, even with all that logic, he's not always completely cold. Like with Liz, there are these moments where something else peeks through.
Oh, Liz. She's like a total wild card in his world, always shaking things up. And he gets so flustered, it's kind of adorable.
Totally. Remember when she asks him to refresh her lemonade? I mean, such a simple thing, but he turns into this grumpy, put upon. Well, not really. You can tell he secretly enjoys it. It's like she's reminding him to lighten up a little.
Exactly. Life doesn't always have to be a strategy session. And you see this other side of him come out, the less guarded one, which I think is where things get really interesting with Val. Their dynamic is totally different because she challenges him on a deeper level.
Yeah, if Kenny's the philosophical sparring partner, Val's the one forcing him to look in the mirror. Like that whole debate about fixing the device in the lab. Classic Devon. Wants the quick, efficient solution.
And Val's like, hold on, what about the long game? What about thinking things through, even if it takes longer?
It's like she's calling out his deepest fear that this need for control is actually blinding him to the bigger picture. And what's really interesting is he actually listens.
Right. There's this shift when he realizes she might have a point. Even admits that he needs to work on seeing beyond his own immediate goals, considering the impact on others.
Which for Devon, let's be real, that's huge. Like maybe he's starting to question his whole way of seeing things. And then there's Tara, which is a whole other dynamic. She's not so much challenging him as she is meeting him where he's at.
Yeah, their conversation in the cemetery always gets me. He's in this really contemplative space thinking about life and death, and she just has this way of offering comfort without pushing.
That setting's important too, right? Surrounded by those gravestones makes you think about legacy and what we leave behind.
And he's struggling with that. Like, is it all just leading to oblivion? But then Tira comes in with this whole other perspective.
Yeah, she's like, hold on, even in death, there's beauty. There are stories, connections, things that endure. It's like she's saying, let people in, Devon. Your story matters.
And that's where we see that wall truly crumble. Just for a second. He admits to being afraid of vulnerability, of getting hurt. It's like he feels emotionally buried, just like the people around them.
So where does he go from there? Does he stay in his fortress of logic, or is this the start of a real transformation?
I mean, that's the question, right? Does he break free?
Yeah.
It makes you think about how personal growth really works. Is it like a straight line or more like wandering around in the dark sometimes?
And maybe building the maze yourself as you go, which kind of feels like what Devon does, right? Like that isolation, it's almost comfortable for him, even if it's lonely.
Exactly. And that's what makes him so relatable, even if he goes about things in this really intense way. We all have those defenses, those ways of protecting ourselves. He's just got them in overdrive.
So is that what we're seeing then, him starting to dismantle those walls? Because the way he opens up to Tira, it feels different. Like there's a real desire for something more.
Maybe testing the waters is a better way to put it. Remember, change takes time, especially when you're as set in your ways as Devon is. Rome wasn't built in a day, right?
Yeah, true, true. Even in that moment with Tira, you can feel that pull, that back and forth between wanting connection and being scared of it.
And that's what makes his journey so compelling. It's not about this perfect transformation, but those little steps, those moments of self-awareness that chip away at the walls we build around ourselves. Not just him, all of us.
So less about a massive overhaul, more like slowly shifting from emotionally unavailable to cautiously open to the possibility. Baby steps, as they say.
Exactly. And it's those smaller moments with Kelly, Liz, even the debates with Kenny that show the potential for real change. Those relationships, they're like mirrors reflecting back different parts of himself, making him question everything he thought he knew.
So as we leave Devon at this kind of crossroads, what's the takeaway for our listeners? What can we learn from him, even if we don't take the emotion as a math problem approach to life?
That it's a journey, not a destination. And that it's
Yes.
okay for that journey to be messy. You know, it's about
Yeah.
embracing the uncertainty, letting ourselves be vulnerable even when it's scary, because that's where the good stuff happens, the connection.
Right. It's not about controlling every little thing, but being open to the unknown, the unexpected. That's what makes life interesting. And honestly, that's how we grow.
Exactly. So as you think about Devon, ask yourself, what walls have I built? And what would it take to let a little more light in? Maybe even just crack open a window.
And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the endlessly fascinating mind of Devon. Until next time, everyone, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep searching for those real, genuine connections, even if they make you a little uncomfortable sometimes. That's where the good stuff is.